Mitch Harper, KSL, joins us. There you go. Mitch, thank you very much for being a part of the show. I'm David Smoke, Paul Catalina, Craig Smoke in 365 Sports. So they've wrapped up football. We have Kalani coming on, Sitake tomorrow. Wanted to kind of just check in with you about the overall feeling coming out of where they were in spring drills, and then we'll get into recruiting as well.
Well, happy to be on, guys, first off, and good afternoon. I think this BYU football team is in a good place right now. I know that the transfer portal losses we'll probably touch on those with Marion and Harrison Taggart were surprising, but this team feels like they've got good depth, and they feel like they're a group that has the ability to break through and get to the Big 12 championship game this year. Now, that's going to be the challenge for this BYU team and program at large, is they've shown that they can compete in the Big 12. Last year at this time, it felt like BYU didn't belong coming off a 5-7 season. Now they know they can compete, and their NIL efforts have improved. Now it's a matter of kind of breaking through and getting to that championship game. They felt like they deserved to be there last year. Even Jake Rzoff called the Alamo Bowl the Big 12 People's Champion against Colorado. But now they got to get it done. So it's a talented football team with probably the best depth Kalani Sitake has had since he's been the head coach, and he's entering his 10th season.
So, but they lost a couple of good depth pieces there. What does that come down to? Because both those guys were going to see time, I'm assuming. So it's not about they lost their starting job. Is this a, trying to find more money situation?
Keelan Marion definitely could be a spot with the looking for more money potentially. He had a huge market right when he officially hit the portal. He was going to be a starter, no question. He was probably the best wide receiver, no questions asked in spring ball. Chase Roberts was out as he continues to recover from a torn labrum injury. He's going to be the number one guy in the fall, and he would have been still even with Keelan Marion in the fold. But as a slot receiver, BYU, you saw signs of it last year. They were utilizing Marion kind of in the Puka Nacua type role. Nowhere near as talented as Nacua from a few years ago, but they were utilizing him in a lot of different ways. And there was a feeling that let's turn him into the All-American that he was in the kick return game. Let's see that as a wide receiver too. There was big expectations. So his entry was a surprise. Harrison Taggart, it's a little bit interesting with him because in spring ball, we did see a lot of Sialia Sarah, a former 4-star recruit who's in his third year in the program. He was dealing with a Lisfranc injury last season, was healthy, but coaches kept him in redshirt status. So he only appeared in 4 games, but you saw him kind of break out in the Alamo Bowl, and he was also highly productive in spring ball. They love their linebacker depth there. And Sarah, I think, he doesn't skip a beat as that inside linebacker potentially for BYU replacing Taggart. But Taggart's a big loss too. Both those guys, wherever they end up, they're going to be starters. I think they're power conference players, no doubt about that. But linebacker position, they're going to be okay. Wide receiver, they got to be active in that portal and add a guy or two to replenish or fill that loss of Keelan Marion.
Mitch, how comfortable do you think the program is now, the transition having occurred at this point? You're kind of on the other side of that. It's still relatively new feeling, but does it feel kind of like the proper fit now and everything's just sort of on track, I guess, if that makes sense?
It does. And, there's in the background, there's a AD search that's still ongoing. It's 3 months in now, and BYU's turning over every stone to fill that AD vacancy because that's going to be critical, replacing Tom Holmoe, who's been around since 2005. But the Big 12 has been a platform for BYU where they feel like they've, kind of taken off. And it's now a game changer is what many people around the athletic department have told me. BYU's completely embraced the Big 12, and they feel like this has been an opportunity to really showcase their resources, their ability to take it to a higher stage. And I think getting that little bit of taste of success, whether it's football, men's basketball, they just want to keep tasting that and taking it to a higher level. And football's no different. Having that proof of concept that you can win in this league, and still, even though the offense wasn't the best last year, they still feel like they can take it to a higher level. And I think they've been very selective with their portal pickups. They only had about 7 or 8 guys that they added out of the portal. That number is going to, of course, increase in the coming weeks with the spring portal window and the need to get wide receivers. But BYU feels like they want to be a player in this league. And I think that's what's been fascinating since this league came together in 2023 is everyone's chasing to be that, yearly fixture where you just say, okay, you just assume they're going to be at the top of the heap because of what they've accomplished year after year. BYU wants to establish itself as that. And it's going to be a challenge because it's a difficult schedule again, but Kalani retained his staff. He's got a lot of the key pieces personnel-wise on the team. They're in a good place right now, and they feel like they're in a spot where they can continue the momentum they built from last year.
Mitch, I think you may have said this, but Marion was the dynamic kick returner, and obviously they felt like maybe he could flash that as a receiver. Is his loss then more than Taggart's because the depth at BYU at linebacker?
Yes, I believe so. Because you look at the BYU wide receiver unit, Roberts comes back, but he's been this leading receiver the past 2 years, but he's coming back from a shoulder injury. He had shoulder surgery in the winter, and that's always delicate. He missed spring ball, and all expectations is that he's going to be ready for fall camp, but still coming back from an injury. And then they're going to look to guys like Atene Nakua, who's the younger brother of Puka Nakua, not a proven commodity, more of a developmental player, but really took a big step forward in spring practices. And then a former 4-star recruit, Cody Hagan, they really like him. He was banged up a little bit in spring ball. He could take a step forward. And then also JoJo Phillips, third year in the program. He's a redshirt sophomore. So they've got options, but there's not as much depth and proven players at the wide receiver position. And, if Chase Roberts isn't fully healthy, that suddenly becomes I don't want to say thin group, but it could be a group where it's a big question mark for, again, a schedule that you have, 2 early games on the slate where you should win, but then you go cross country to East Carolina, and then you're in the heart of Big 12 play going at Colorado. It's a tough schedule. So BYU's got to find some answers in this portal cycle in the spring window to rebuild that wide receiver unit, in my opinion.
Why do I feel like Chase Roberts, who's only in his 4th year, has been there for 8? It seems like it. I remember when he had the big game at BYU at home against Baylor. I just seem like he's been around longer than that. Of course, this is his 4th year, so it's not like he's a freshman or anything.
Well, yes, since BYU's kind of been on the Big 12 radar, Chase has been on the roster since 2021, so had a mission, and then he redshirted, and now 4 straight years. He considered the NFL a little bit, but BYU took care of him from NIL and roster retention, and he decided to run it back. He would have probably been a late day 3 guy at best, because the wide receiver position is always so deep. You got to be elite to be a top 100 pick at that spot. But Chase feels like he can and continue to improve, because I thought he was highly productive last year. I expect his workload to increase a lot, though. I mean, last year 50 to 60 touches, somewhere in there. With Marion gone, they got to utilize him in a lot of different ways. 75 touches should be at a minimum for Chase Roberts if he's fully healthy.
So last year, obviously, the whole thing was, my God, who's the quarterback going to be? I mean, it was, and that was until the week before the season started, and then Jake Rzoff has this fantastic season. Is the perfect leader that the team needed in the moment for sure, and got better as the season went along. Now that they don't have that question to answer, A, has everything feel like it's more fallen into place, and B, what are the things that are going to keep BYU fans up at night, at least a little bit curious about, okay, how do we help Jake, take that next step?
There's still that feeling with Jake about ball security and take in turnovers. Last year, 12 interceptions. Aaron Roderick, the offensive coordinator for BYU, is, challenged Rzoff to be more in line with what Zach Wilson put up in 2020, around 33 touchdowns, 3 picks. I mean, that's incredible stuff. That was a relatively weak schedule amidst COVID. Jaron Hall was similar, whereas 30-plus touchdowns, only 6 picks. That's the expectation, I think, for a senior Jake Rzoff, and that's what Aaron Roderick has challenged him to do. I thought Rzoff in spring ball, it wasn't as precise and as the execution wasn't as high as maybe I was expecting in the media observation windows that we got to see, but there were some key guys out on the offense, and the offensive line is a little bit retooled. I think they've got good options there, but that is going to be an area to figure out who's going to be that starting 5 in front of him. But Rzoff is a really good leader. But can he become the best quarterback in the Big 12? I feel like that's going to be the requirement. You saw it last year. Sam Leavitt was the best QB in this league, and they won the conference. And, Jake Rzoff's kind of been in the spotlight. He's gotten NIL deals that have kind of elevated his popularity and fame. Is he going to still be that guy that makes the main thing, as he likes to say, and take this thing to a higher level? That's going to be the challenge, because those turnovers have been costly. Even in that Alamo Bowl, that was one of the downsides of what felt like a near flawless performance from BYU. It was some of those turnovers from Jake. He's got to clean that up. And if he can, BYU could be, real tough out and want to be one of the top teams again in the league. And last year they averaged around 31 points. They got to get that up to around 34, 35 points, be in the top 20 of scoring in college football, in my opinion, if they're going to be in that top of the Big 12.
Mitch, excuse me for not knowing, the past 20 years of BYU history, but has there never not been insane crowds? I mean, is it like other places where you have to win to a certain clip, or is it always like that no matter what?
It's a good question, because about 20 years ago, oddly enough, there's always been a strong base of at least 55,000 you're going to probably see at BYU games. But, as far as just the entertainment, the theatrics, Cosmos on, jumping off a parachute, whatever it is, that's kind of elevated itself in the last 7 to 10 years. I remember BYU brought in a marketing firm from New York. They've also got a marketing team with David Almodovar, who's on their support staff. They've really kind of taken things to a higher level on that side of it. And I think also, too, that BYU Baylor game in 2022, when Brett Yormark came to BYU for the first time, there was a real kind of challenge to just enhance the entertainment aspect. BYU traditionally used to be a place where it was just do the same thing over and over again. And for many years, it got pretty stale. I think the last decade or so, it's really leveled up. And I think, again, being in the Big 12, trying to find new revenue streams, new avenues to entice people to come to games, that's, I think, helped the efforts of doing that. Because now, even if BYU is not the 11-2 team, there's still this Cosmo's going to do a crazy stunt, the food, all this stuff, the crazy crowds, the fireworks, people are all decked out of blue. That was not commonplace. They've always had big numbers, but the entertainment side of it has really leveled up. And I think that kind of adjusts to what we're seeing in the market today, where you got to have more than just a good on-field product. You got to have a environment to entice people to share their content on social media and kind of show that they're there. They've improved the Wi-Fi system. So they've done a really good job of that. And then, of course, having the on-field product helps the cause as well.
Well, that game you talked about was double overtime game. It was nuts. Yeah. Night game. And everyone that traveled up there had never been there before. Maybe we played back in the 80s, but that just couldn't stop talking about it. And I think would love to see that type of atmosphere in any stadium. If it's not, there's a few probably like that too. So last year, BYU won by 3, 1, and 6. And the history, really, recent history in the Big 12, Mitch, and this, is that there have been teams that have had a surge, and they were right there and not getting enough credit from the College Football Playoff Committee before the 2 losses. But there has been, you win a handful of those, and the next year, that's not as easy. Is that even being discussed right now?
It needs to be. And Kalani Sitake was hitting on it hard in spring ball about complacency. BYU loses 2 guys in Tyler Batty and Connor Pay. I think Tyler Batty's a guy that we could hear his name called this week and maybe in day 3 as a defensive end. But those guys were leaders that really kind of led things inside the locker room beyond the culture that Kalani's has built. And people talk about that and everything that Kalani does, but it was really a player-led team. They were really motivated by coming off a 5-7 season. he had a lot of guys motivated. BYU's always been a team and program historically that does well as an underdog. It's when the expectations happen, when they come upon that program, can they deliver? And I think that's going to be a real challenge. And you saw that fine margin for error in the Big 12 last year when, BYU goes up against a 5-win Kansas team and they lose that game in Provo. And Rzoff had some real poor decisions in that game. Clean those up and you're going to a Big 12 championship game to play, probably ASU. So it's a fine margin for error. And, I think some people said that this schedule is not good. I completely disagree. I mean, I think just the logistics of it, of having Utah in the middle of the season in October, Texas Tech on the road, we see what they've done in the transfer portal. This is going to challenge BYU. And if they can come out with another 10, 11 win season, they're going to be prepared to, for whatever the postseason has in store for them. But it's a thin margin for error. But I think that's, where BYU has really kind of been aggressive and selective with who they identify in the portal. Keanu Tanavasa, defensive tackle from Utah. Jay Hill, the defensive coordinator for BYU, has said he could be the best D tackle in the country. Now it's high expectations, but they think very highly of him and what he can provide in the interior. He's going to be one of the leaders that kind of leads that player-led program that you saw a year ago. He's going to be one of those key guys.
Mitch, Marion and Taggart, if they were to happen to end up in Waco and playing for Baylor, would that be the trade that was for Rob Wright III?
Yeah, yes,
players to be named later.
UCLA, Tennessee on their trade, BYU, Baylor. It would be great. I think that would be perfect. Maybe that can silence everything.
That would be fun. I don't know if there's nobody. I know you got to go. We do too. But of the 8 teams that are a part of the Big 12, the new schools, nobody, I can't think, Houston basketball obviously, has taken advantage of the jump and being a part of the conference like BYU has done. I mean, Arizona State last year, and we have this and that, Colorado, the excitement, but nobody has taken advantage of it like it appears, no question, that BYU has done.
I agree, and I think that it was just a program that always felt like once they got that validation in a conference, they could really take it to higher levels. But still, they haven't won a title. They haven't. They've been competitive, but there's still another gear. There's still another level that they have to reach. And can they? I mean, football and basketball, they've been close. They've had big wins and taken the nation by storm in times, but they still haven't won anything as far as a title yet. So that's going to be the challenge for both football and men's basketball. It's going to be a fascinating year. And I think BYU fans, they are as fired up as I've seen them. I mean, they were excited to get into this league. It feels like it's even kicking into a higher level with the expectations, preseason, likely rankings for football and men's basketball. Should be a really interesting year to follow and cover BYU sports this upcoming year.
Mitch, thank you. Good stuff. Great segment. Thanks for being a part of the show. Mitch Harper, KSL Sports, with us on 365 Sports.